This will look fabulous on a hat or on a bag, hair clip, or a hairband. Making our magic ring. Now I'm sure there are a few ways to do this, but this is how I do it. I hold the shorter piece in my left hand, and then I've got the longer piece, and I wrap it around the back of my hand, up and over, and I hold it with my thumb. I grab my hook. Might be easy if you put the wool just up like that. I grab my hook and grab the loose piece and pull it up, and then hold on to that piece there. So I'm just grabbing all that yarn that's over my hand, dropping that down, putting my wool back onto my hand, and just swapping hands, and then I just do a chain stitch and just adjust this. Which one is it? There we go, the short one, just pulling the short one, and that little chain stitch just secured it in, and now we are working into this center ring here. What we need to do is work into the center here, and we are going to work 15 double crochets. First of all, we need to chain 3. This counts as our first double crochet. Now I've just got the loop in my fingers here. Depending on how you hold your hook and wool and everything will depend on how you can hold your ring. So just working a double crochet into the ring. See, if you let go, it goes all loose. So I just hold it like that, having a little bit of the loop up the top there, and then I work into there, and that keeps this tight here. So working, it's a little bit fiddly at first, working our double crochets into the ring, still into the ring there, but I'm just tightening it off here. So that's 3, 4, and as you go around you just move around. 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, and 15. I always double check just to make sure I can count properly. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, and our chain 3 is our number 15. So now what we can do is, on our short piece, we just want to pull, holding on to the top here, just pull and see how this loop is getting smaller, and you just want to pull until it is all nice and tight and creates a circle. So now what we want to do, just putting our loop back on our hook, and we're going to sew this part in later. We want to join our circle together, so we are going to be going into the top of the chain 3. So placing your hook into the top of the chain 3, which was our first stitch, and then making a slip stitch, chain up 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. We want to skip 2 stitches. Now our first one comes out of this one here, so that's 1, 2, into our next stitch. We want to work a single crochet, chaining 5, skipping 2 stitches, 1, 2, and into our next. Want to work a single crochet, chaining up 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. Want to skip 2 stitches, 1, 2, into the next stitch. Want to single crochet, chaining 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, skipping 2 stitches, 1, 2, into our next stitch, working a single crochet, and then 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, skipping 2 stitches and working a single crochet into there. What we need to do now is, because we're going to be working out of our chain spaces, we need to skip across to here. So we need to do a slip stitch. So going into the chain space, grabbing our yarn, pulling through and pulling through that stitch. Now we are working out of our chain space. We want to work 1 single crochet into our space, a half double crochet, wrapping our yarn, going into our space, wrapping our yarn, pulling up. We have 3 on our hook, yarning over and pulling through all 3. Doing a double crochet, wrapping our yarn into the loop, yarning over. We have 3 on our hook, yarning over, pulling through 2, yarning over and pulling through 2. Next stitch is going to be a treble, so that's wrapping twice, going down into our stitch, wrapping up, yarn over and pulling through. We have 4 on our hook, yarning over, pulling through 2, that's yarning over again, pulling through 2, yarning over and pulling through 2. Now our next stitch is even taller again, and I think it is called a double treble. So we are going to wrap 3 times, so 1, 2, 3, down into our space, yarning over, pulling up a loop. We have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 loops on our hook this time, yarning over, pulling through 2, yarning over, pulling through 2, yarning over, pulling through 2, and yarning over and pulling through 2. Now that stitch was huge, really tall. So now we need to go down to our treble, and what I'm doing is I'm shifting all the stitches across on my chain here. So a double treble is twice, 1, 2, sorry, we're working our treble this time, so it's wrapping it twice, going into our space, yarning over, pulling up a loop. We have 4 on our hook, yarning over, pulling through 2, yarning over, pulling through 2, yarning over and pulling through 2. Now we want to work our double crochet, so that's wrapping once, going into our space, pulling up a loop. We've got 3, pulling through 2, pulling through 2. Our half double crochet, wrapping our yarn, going into the space, yarning over. We have 3 on our hook and pulling through all 3. And now we just want to make a little baby single crochet, go into our space, yarning over, pulling up a loop. We have 2, yarning over and pulling through 2. And that is our first petal. How's that for a stitch lesson? You needed all these different stitches because, as you can see, they get higher as they go up to that really big stitch, and then we come back down the other side, which creates the curve for our petal. What we want to do now is slip stitch back into this space into our next one. So we just slip stitch back into this space into our next one. So we're just going to go down with our hook into the space there, yarning over and pulling through that loop. So our first stitch is our single crochet. Going into the space, yarning over, pulling up, we have 2, yarning over, pulling through 2. Our next stitch is our half double crochet. Yarning over, going into our space, yarning over, we have 3, going through all 3. Next is our double crochet, wrapping our yarn, going into our space, yarning over, pulling up a loop, we have 3 on our hook, yarning over, pulling through 2, yarning over and pulling through 2. Our next stitch is our treble, that's wrapping twice, going into our space, yarning over, pulling up a loop, 4 on our hook, yarning over and pulling through 2, yarning over, pulling through 2, yarning over and pulling through 2. Next is our double treble. Yarning over 3 times, going into our space, yarning over, pulling up a loop, we have 5 on our hook, yarning over through 2, through 2, through 2 and through 2. That is the tallest stitch that we use here. Isn't it just gigantic? So now we need to go back down the other side. So now we're going back to our treble. That's wrapping our yarn twice, going into our space, pulling up a loop, yarning over, pulling through 2, yarning over, pulling through 2, and through 2. Now after this pedal, I'm going to stop talking. You can just watch what I do. So that was our treble. Next is our double crochet. Yarning over, going into our space, pulling up a loop. We have 3 on our hook, yarning over, pulling through 2, yarning over and pulling through 2. Next is our half double crochet. Yarning over, going into the space, yarning over, we have 3 on our hook, yarning over and pulling through all 3. Half double crochets are quite pretty when they're all together as well. Quite like that stitch. So single crochet into the gap, yarning over, pulling up, got 2, yarning over and pulling through 2. So now we have 2 petals to our flower. Ooh, it's Mickey Mouse or a cat. Now we need to work over to our next chain space. Remember, we have to do our slip stitch over there. So slipping. So now we want to work a single crochet, and I'm not going to talk through every single loop this time. You can just watch. Going into our space, working the whole time into our space. Doing a single crochet. Our next one is our half double crochet. Next is our double crochet. Next is our treble. Next is our double treble. And our treble, wrapping twice. Next is a double. Half double crochet. And a single crochet. There we go, 3 petals. Working a slip stitch over to our next gap. Excuse me. Working a single crochet. 1 half double crochet, a double crochet, a treble, and a double treble. That's wrapping 3 times. Treble, wrapping 2, double, half double, and a single. Now if you can't remember this, just write down that formula for there. So it's single crochet, half double crochet, a double crochet, a treble crochet, that's when you wrap twice, a double treble, you wrap 3 times, back down to a treble, you wrap twice, a double crochet, a half double crochet, and a single crochet. So there are 9 stitches in that petal, not including our slip stitch that we do first of all. So we're slip stitching over to this space here, working single crochet, half double crochet, double crochet, treble, double treble, which is wrapping 3 times, treble, which is wrapping twice, a double, a half double, and a single. Now if you have completed this project, give yourself a clap, because this is a lot of concentration. You've got to remember what stitch is coming next, or you're just following along with me, but you are still remembering what stitches have to be done. So now I'm just going to slip stitch down into this single crochet down here, if that's from our previous row. Just going to slip in there just to tie off our work. Now what we want to do, grabbing our scissors, and these scissors, if you can get a pair, are fantastic because it doesn't matter how you pick them up. You can pick them up with your eyes closed, you're still going to pick them up the right way. Not like normal scissors where you've got to have them the right way, else they just don't work at all. So trimming off there, and then pulling out that. We want to sew this end in. So I've threaded my needle, and this is where we've just finished off. I'm just going to sew it to the back. And then, these flowers are fantastic for sewing in the end. You're just going to go underneath the stitches that are around the chain that we made, our 5 chains. So there we go, we've just picked up all those stitches and then pull it through there. And then go back the other way, but skip that first stitch that we have there, because that will anchor that down. Go back through. And that's perfect. Then we just need to snip it off. Not cutting your stitches, I have done that before on something. Completely wrecked it because you've just cut your stitches that you just made. And there we have our quite groovy looking flower. Now this part you can leave long or you can sew it in, depending on if you want to attach it to something. This will look fabulous on a hat or on a bag, hair clip or a hairband. Now deciding where you want to put your flower, and poor Mrs. Foamy, she's got pins stuck in her head because they kept slipping off because she hasn't got any hair. So deciding on where you want to put your flower, I want mine to be on the side, so I'm going to sew it onto there. So when it's on your head and you've decided where you want it, I've just tied it to one of the strands here, so when I take it off the head it's not going to move and I won't know where to tie it on. Making sure your strands aren't twisted, lay down your flower, and now we just want to sew them on so they're evenly spaced onto the back of our flower. I've just cut off a long piece of wool and I'm just attaching it to the back of the flower. I have tied a knot so that it is secure. Now I'm just going into the first chain and I'm just sewing it down so that it is secure. Doing that a couple of times. Now I'm moving up to the middle of my chain, making sure that the lengths are all even. And I'm going to weave this piece through the back here till I get to the centre. Coming up from the centre. So I've come up to the middle there, and then I'm just going to go through the chain with my needle. We're just tacking it to the back of our flower. So stitching into the flower, going up onto the other side of the chain. Oops, not supposed to have that loop there. There we go. And then do that one more time, just tacking it down. There we go. Now sewing up to the top. And then attaching it in the same spot that we attached our first one, so it's on the edge here. Making sure our chain is even. And then sewing, making sure we catch the chain. Doing that a couple of times. I mean, you can sew this any way you like, I'm just showing you the way I'm going to do it. And then we just need to sew in our end. So just picking a spot on our flower, close to where our balls come out, just weave it into the back of our stitches. And then snipping off excess. And sewing in the tail from the beginning where we started. So there we go, we have our finished headband. It ties at the back.